The little town of Uncas. Uncas has always been a small town and never seemed to grow, but the residents don't seem to care because we all love it so. The main street is nice and quiet and is about a mile long, and you can hear the birds singing as you are driving along. Our town is blessed with good water, with wells about 30 feet deep, and the water that is drawn from them is always cool and sweet. We would like to go on living as a little town in this nation, but it seems it is impossible as the government wants it for recreation. One by one, the residents are leaving, with happy memories left behind, to go and find a new location where folks will be nice and kind. We hope that one day in the future we will understand and know why the government had to buy our town and we all had to go.
Call Lake is a small reservoir in northern Oklahoma. Behind the lake is a dam that supplies power to the surrounding area and is a popular spot for boating, camping, fishing, hunting, and other recreational activities. It might look like any other lake, but beneath this peaceful surface lies a much more troubling story. Decades of flooding along the Arkansas River destroyed farmland and threatened communities, prompting the U.S. government to pass the Flood Control Act of 1962. As part of this effort, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers constructed Call Lake northeast of Ponca City, Oklahoma between 1966 and 1976. Under the Fifth Amendment, federal, state, and local governments have the right to seize private land for public use, but they also have the responsibility to provide just compensation to the citizens for that land. While the Call Lake project reflected the government's responsibility to protect public safety, it also displaced entire communities and the Call tribe, raising the questions about citizens' property rights and the government's responsibility to provide fair market value for properties taken under eminent domain, as well as its responsibility to relocate communities preserving their cultural and historical heritage. Additionally, the lake's creation violated the Treaty of 1859, which recognized the rights of the Kaw tribe to their native land, raising questions about the government's responsibility to honor its agreements. While the creation of Kaw Lake initially resulted in the forced relocation of families and tribal members, the loss of cultural heritage and tribal land, and the disturbance of ancestral graves, it also successfully controlled flooding in Kay County, created hydroelectric power for the state, increased tourism and recreation for the region, and continues to support Oklahoma's maritime trade along the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system. The Kaw tribe, originally a part of the Kansas Nation, lived in present-day Kansas and Missouri until a series of treaties forced them into smaller and smaller territories. The Treaty of 1825 opened 18 million acres of Kaw land to white settlement, and by 1859, the Kansas reservation had shrunk to 80,000 acres. The Oklahoma land rushes further eroded native lands, especially after the Cherokee land strip of 1893, when 100,000 settlers arrived in Oklahoma. As the Kaw tribe settled in what later became Kay County, Oklahoma, they eventually adapted to their new land. However, their new land had another major drawback: periodic flooding from the Arkansas River. From its source in the Rocky Mountains near Leadville, Colorado, the Arkansas River flows east through Kansas before entering Kay County, Oklahoma, then southeast until it converges with the Verdigris and Grand Rivers to become part of Oklahoma's Great Interior Water Trade Route, now known today as the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River Navigation System. For decades, the Arkansas River Valley had been subject to massive floods that destroyed valuable farmland and devastated towns. Following yet another period of severe flooding in 1943, Oklahoma's governor and later U.S. Senator Robert S. Kerr saw an opportunity not to just control the flooding, but to boost Oklahoma's economy by turning the river into a commercial trade route. Kerr's plan was massive. Wanted nothing less than to bring a seaport from ocean-going vessels to landlocked Oklahoma. Working closely with Senator John L. McClellan of Arkansas, for whom state's massive maritime navigation system is also named, Kerr used his political influence to push through funding flood control projects, including Call Lake. In 1956, Kerr and McClellan broke ground on what would eventually become the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River Navigation System, connecting Tulsa Port at Katosa to the Mississippi River and ultimately the Gulf of Mexico. After another massive flood in 1957, which submerged Kay County farmland, farmers and businesses demanded action. Kerr leveraged this local support to help pass the Flood Control Act of 1962, authorizing Call Lake's construction. While many in Oklahoma supported the project, those living in the proposed flood zone did not. Entire communities would be destroyed, and families who had lived there for generations would be forced to leave. Small towns like Old Call City and Uncas weren't just locations, they were homes with deep roots and cultural heritage. Old Call City, once a thriving town with 800 residents near the Arkansas River, was founded at the turn of the century. Many of the residents were descendants of the original settlers. Uncas, another small community in the flood zone, had been established during the 1893 land rush as a trading post. In addition to the relocation of small towns in the flood zone, the U.S. government would also need to relocate the Kaw tribe, whose small plot of remaining native land was theoretically protected by the Treaty of 1859. Living in the future location of the lake did not. In 1959, 88 property owners affected by the proposed creation of the lake formed the Anti-Kaw Dam Association, arguing that relocating their farms would be economically devastating and pointing out that it would almost be impossible to sell their property or secure a loan for new farmland. In addition, members of the association pointed out that many of Kaw City's 800 residents had moved there after retiring and did not have the economic means to relocate and start over again as retirees. Despite their opposition, big business interests, included the Continental Oil Company, supported the project. The company wrote to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers citing that the need for water supply, flood control, and economic development. Their influence, along with the government background, meant the outcome was inevitable. In 1966, construction of Kaw Lake began. In building Kaw Lake, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was responsible for protecting public safety by engineering flood control barriers to protect valuable farm and industrial lands in Kay County. To carry out this responsibility, both Oklahoma state and federal government exercised its right of eminent domain, a government power that allows seizure of private property for public use. Under the Fifth Amendment, this power is only legal if it serves a public purpose, such as flood control, infrastructure, or economic development. However, the Fifth Amendment also protects the property rights of citizens and states that no citizen shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. In building the reservoir, government agencies were responsible for providing just compensation for any land taken through their right of eminent domain. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that just compensation means the fair market value of the property, but many residents of Old Kaw City and Uncas were believed they were underpaid.
People talked of how little they were paid for their land, like $25 for a lot in town.
For the Kaw tribe and the displaced residents, the impact of Kaw Lake was devastating. Their homes, history, and cultural heritage were lost beneath the rising waters, leaving nothing but memories. For the Kaw tribe, this was just another chapter in a long history of forced removal. Worse, the lake's construction had required the forced relocation of tribal burial sites, violating their rights to honor and protect their ancestors. In 1996, erosion along the Kaw Lake's banks unearthed human remains from the Washunga Cemetery, once home to over 600 Kaw tribe burials. The discovery reopened painful wounds, raising questions about whether the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers truly met its responsibilities. Today, Kaw Lake serves as a recreational asset and a source of both power and revenue for the state of Oklahoma. The lake receives thousands of visitors each year, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reports that the Kaw Lake continues to provide important flood control for both Kay County and the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system. Yet, for those who once called this land home, it's a symbol for loss.
It's like it's all underwater now, like the lake road dam flooded everything you know.